Welcome to another episode of the Making of a Teacher podcast. I am Joshua Nelson, and I am joined by art teacher extraordinaire Susan Kemner-Reed here in St. Andrews, in Austin, Texas, in a beautiful art studio that Susan calls home. And we're going to talk for a little bit about Susan's background and how she found her way to St. Andrews and why she loves art so much. Or do you love art? I just implied that you love it. I would imagine you would have to, right?
I love it, yes.
Thank you.
It's my life.
Yeah, so thank you for joining me. I'm going to start off, as I always do, I want to find out a little bit more about your background and where you grew up. You said you were a lifelong Austinite, or you call Austin your home.
I call Austin my home, but I lived all over when I was growing up. We moved every 2 to 3 years. So often you think, well, that would be a military family, but my father was in a business where he would go in and fix up companies that were not doing well.
Okay.
And so he would go every 2 to 3 years to fix up that district and then clean it up, get it going again, and then we'd be off to the next location.
Just on and on. What was that like for you in terms of your school experience? Were you always the new kid at each school, or did you just get used to that idea of being new to a school?
Yeah, I was just always new.
Yeah.
I'd get in there, I'd get settled, 2 or 3 years, start to feel comfortable, and it would be time to move on.
That sounds rough. I mean, I'm listening to it and thinking, but how did you handle that? Did you just think, this is just what my family's like, and I'm... Yeah. Do you think any hobbies, did you develop any hobbies or interests based on that sort of nomadic lifestyle?
Any hobbies based on that? No, but I think when I was growing up, there were 2 things I really loved to do. One was read, and one was to draw.
Right.
And so
both of those
are solitary, essentially.
And you can do those
And I
anywhere.
did that,
yeah.
Whether you have a friend over or not. I certainly learned how to make friends
Right.
and how to, move into new situations. But
Yeah.
I think that I had chosen to stay in Austin for the last 38 years because I just didn't want to move anymore.
Right.
I found a place that I could call home as an adult.
That's great.
Came down here to go to the University of Texas, and I just didn't leave like many people did.
Right.
So,
Well, I'm glad you stayed, for one.
me
And
too.
many of your students are glad that you stayed.
Me too.
Did you, what was your favorite place growing up of all of the places that you went around and round and round? Did you have a city or a part of the country that just spoke to you?
No, I don't think that I particularly thought about that. The one place that I really did enjoy was for 1 year we lived in this little town called Hamilton, Ohio.
Okay.
And it's pretty close to Cincinnati, and we lived on this in this very rural neighborhood in a house that was just amazing with apple orchards out back.
Yeah.
And so at about 8 years old, I spent a lot of time roaming all that acreage and eating apples.
Yeah, that sounds
it was
fun.
only for a year. So, but I always think, when I think back to the houses that I loved living in that house.
That house. That sounds like that would be a fun place no matter what the age. But at 8 years old especially, running around in a different big place like that. When you were drawing and reading, did you feel like you had a natural aptitude for drawing? I mean, did people
Always.
comment on that? Like, wow, you are quite the artist. Or
Always. From as long as I can remember, I have been drawing or painting or doing something creative.
Yeah.
It's just part of my life. I don't know what my life would be without it. It's
Right.
just there all the time.
Did you find a way to input it no matter what you were doing? If you had like a science experiment, you would draw really nice illustrations, or did you kind of find a way to sneak it into whatever subject it was?
Yeah, I regularly got in trouble at school for drawing instead of doing what I was supposed to be doing. But yes, and this is I don't know if this is I should say this, but it really got me through high school, my drawing, because I had to take math courses that I was miserable in, and the teachers would feel so sorry for me that they would let me do some kind of art project.
Right.
So I got through geometry by doing large charcoal portraits of mathematicians.
Nice.
I know.
Yeah. I bet that teacher still has those pictures
I don't
somewhere.
know, but thank God she let me get through that because, I would not have passed.
Yeah.
But I was able to pass by doing that, putting the effort in there because I just didn't have a mind that could compute in the same way that other kids could.
Geometry seems to be a class in which, the spatial awareness component, you would have that kind of in spades. Did you feel like your teachers, other than having you draw the mathematicians, the charcoal mathematicians, did you pick up anything from geometry, or maybe some people have described it as like, well, it just makes sense, and all the geometry is being taught to them just as well. I already know this. It's in part of my experience as I draw something in perspective. Why would I have to be taught this?
No, it never made sense to me in class. I understand space and how to move through it and how to design space. I understand. I worked in a museum back shop in the building area, and I understood all about measuring and angles and all of that in a very practical way, but I couldn't do it in geometry.
With the textbook open and the
none
notebook.
Of that made sense. In algebra, the formulas, I was clueless about all of that. So.
I'd like to apologize on the behalf of math teachers that didn't find a way to really get you, because I do think that we, especially in the math world, we just teach it to everybody the exact same way, thinking that it's the only way to do math. And I think, especially for somebody with your practical ability with understanding spatial relationships, it's a shame that you weren't able to differentiate that kind of mess of a classroom and figure out a way for it to connect with what you were already doing.
I've often wondered about it because I think that maybe I could have been good at it.
Yeah.
I just didn't. For some reason, the way it was taught never made sense to me. So.
Well, so much so not in art, and we've talked about this, you and I, off of camera here, but so in a lot of the core classes, math being one of them, there's no real way to teach except for just to expose kids to the information that they've decided is the most important. But meaning, I still think that there's hope. I'd love to see you in a geometry class now.
Oh, I don't know. That sounds painful. It sounds painful. And these kids in here talk about calculus and all this stuff, and I think, oh my God, I'm clueless. But yeah, maybe it would be fun.
Yeah, I think it would just, the doodles I think would be pretty phenomenal. I'm somebody who's always curious what you're doodling on whenever we're in a meeting. I've for years, I tell people that this is the first time I've said it, but in some of our bigger general faculty meetings, I find a way so I can sit behind you and see what you're doodling. You did a phenomenal picture of the 31st Street Chapel once. I think we were there for 2 hours, and it was so nice. And for me, it was escape from the boring meeting to look and see what where you were on that picture. So thank you for that.
You bet.
Was that? Did you ever get in trouble for doodling? Was that one of those things where the teacher came down on you and said, "Stop drawing that"?
Yeah, I did because I would also write the notes, but I would also have drawings always going on. And
do you think that was fair for them to? Because I see you as someone who's, when you're doodling, that you are paying attention. This is your way of interpreting the information. It seems like that, and I see a lot of students that they just doodle incessantly during class. It feels almost unfair to call those students out.
Well, one of the things that I hope that happens when I'm in faculty meetings and I'm drawing is that people will realize that, yes, I am listening because I can ask pertinent questions,
right.
But I'm drawing. And for me, I think drawing is one of those ways that I can sit still.
Yeah. Because
I don't think I'm a good sitting still kind
unless you're drawing.
Unless I'm drawing. But it does also help me hear.
Yeah.
And so I figure if people can see that, see me do that, then they can understand it when my students do that. And I think that I've been able to get that across to teachers, that this really helps some people listen.
Do you is there a time aspect to it? Do you remember drawing certain things during meetings or times of your life or classes? Do you ever connect them maybe chronologically, like, oh, I was drawing a picture of this beautiful, the windows of the chapel during this meeting? Does that aspect ever play into it?
Well, sometimes I remember exactly what's happening when I look back at the drawing. I can see, oh, that was when I was doing that. Not just because I'm looking at it, but
Right.
because I remember the whole part of it. There was, my mother used to sit, when she was on the phone, when I was little, she would draw these little things that were parentheses like this. You know, not just the that shape,
yeah.
but the one that went like this.
Braces.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And I always thought that looked like a face.
Yeah.
So I would bug her while she was on the phone asking her to draw those for me, because then what I would do is I would turn those old-fashioned parentheses into faces.
Little silhouette faces. That's
so
great.
I probably was about 3 when I was doing that.
Oh, wow.
So I think that's where I really started enjoying drawing, but there's never been a question about me being an artist.
Right.
Some people come to it later. I don't know why it happens. I can teach anybody how to draw.
Yeah.
And so, it doesn't matter whether they think they're an artist or not, but I don't know how I knew
Right.
to do it.
It was always a part
It's
of.
always there.
Always there.
Yeah.
What was school like? If you knew you were going to be an artist and you are now put in classes in which maybe you're going to use some of that to be an artist, maybe it's math and you don't feel like you're going to be using any of that. What was high school like for you in general? I guess maybe, and was art always there?
Well, high school wasn't all that much fun for me. I didn't much like it, so I got out as quickly as I could. I was a good student, so I could finish up in my junior year and
Graduate.
Then I went on to college.
Me too. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I wanted to get out of there. Everybody
Yeah,
else
me
was going to
too.
take like some sort of senior class. I just wanted out. I was done with school.
and they're, like, what, don't you want to go to the prom? It's like, no, I want to get out of here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So sometimes I think what I've done here at St. Andrews is create the kind of art program I would have liked
Right.
at my school. But the kinds of things that we did were very craft oriented, like pour clay slip into molds and make little
Yeah.
owl piggy banks.
Okay.
Or
So
make a little leather belt buckle, so that kind
Yeah.
of stuff. And so nothing that really taught me about art. I knew a lot on my own.
right.
But when I was 13, my mom gave me an oil painting box, with brushes and the paints, and I got to go to a gallery that was near our house and do lessons on Saturdays.
Okay.
And so I think that also was a place where I found myself doing really well. So that was okay. I did that for a while.
Yeah.
And as I said, I just wanted to get out of high school.
Yeah.
So I did.
I'm with you.
And then I went to study studio art in college. So that was fine.
Yeah.
That was great.
So out of high school, straight into college, was that the experience? I mean, like, rather than making the molds of the owl, piggy banks,
Yeah.
now you're actually doing some real art.
Yeah, so when you study studio art, you get thrown into these long studio art classes.
Right.
You did that too, right? Didn't you do
No,
that?
no. I mean, I had many artist friends, and I know what their classes were like compared to my math classes in college. Yes, they were much different.
So, they'd be 3 or 4 hours long, 2 or 3 times a week, and so it'd be pretty intense. And
Yeah.
I feel like I, just learned a whole lot really fast.
Right.
And I was at a junior college in Dallas, and I worked there in the evenings in the counseling center and went to school during the day. And so I did that for 2 years and graduated from there, and then came down to UT
Right.
My junior year. So.
And then stayed here in Austin ever
I did,
since then.
Yeah. Studio art at UT, and I stayed, and I finished up my bachelor's degree, my BFA, and then I went on to do graduate work.
Right. What were you interested in at that time in terms of medium? Has it changed? Do you feel like you stick in one medium, or do you feel like it gets boring, so you have to try something else? I mean, not going from maybe drawing to like sculpture, maybe so, but
Well, primarily 2D work, painting
Right.
and drawing
Yeah.
were the 2 things that I did the most of. I took classes at UT in printmaking, so I enjoyed that.
Right.
But primarily, I considered myself a painter.
yeah. Now, did you think I'm going to now I'm an artist, I'll just start making money off of my art? Is that
No.
No?
No, I didn't think that. But one of the things that was very cool about coming down here to UT was I had that financial aid packet that gave me work-study hours, and so 15 hours a week I worked somewhere on campus, and the place that I got to work was at the Art Museum.
Oh.
And that actually was where I really learned.
Right.
My real schooling was being around art there and learning how to handle it and what to do with it, and all of the technical aspects of putting up an exhibition, and I thoroughly love that.
You said something that I was just going to jump on. You said that's where I really learned art. I mean, at that moment, and we kind of spoke about this before we started recording, were you conscious that this is it? Did you compare it, or is it that easy to talk about? Did you compare your experience in some of your classes versus being there at the museum and go, wow, just being here, I'm actually learning so much more than in my classes, or is there a... It's
absolutely true that I learned so much more at the museum. And because of it, I am a huge museum goer, and I believe in it in teaching. I want to take my students all the time to see art, the real thing.
What do you learn? Let me ask. So what do you learn when you're there? I mean...
So we'd be putting up a show. Let's say we put up I remember when Frida Kahlo was pretty much not known, not a household word like she is today, but they did an exhibition there, I guess probably about 30 years ago. And 35 years ago or something. Is it still working?
Yeah, it is. We're still, there's
okay. And so we put up all these fantastic paintings of hers. And because you're sitting there with the white gloves on, holding the paintings, putting them up on the wall, you get a chance to really look at it in a way other people can't. So I could sit and study the brushstroke. I could sit and look at the colors. I could see the art really in front of me.
Right.
Whether it was that or a Charles and Ray Eames chair that I could sit in and try it out, not that you're supposed to, but
hey, there's got to be some perks to working there, right?
So so all of this art came through the gallery. We usually put up, we would put up at least one exhibition a week, so generally 52 exhibitions a year. Over at UT, and we had 2 spaces. And what's the HRC now, and what has now become the Blanton was the University Art Museum. And so, I painted the signs that went out front. I created the artwork. I did the conditioning reports where you get in there, and you look at every little thing that could be wrong with the piece and write it down. I did all that kind of stuff. I didn't even know that existed behind the scenes, and I loved it.
That's sort of detailed work. I can see now when you're saying that's where I learned about art, that you're familiar with the art in a much more intimate way than even if I'm going to go to the museum and just stroll through and look at it, even if I take a sketch of it maybe, but if you're there packing it and really, every little brushstroke you're documenting, that does seem like, well, you're going to be learning an awful lot about how art is made.
Well, in museums, if you try to get too close to a painting, they get all upset about it. And sometimes you just want to get up and you want to look at it this way, and the guards are all, So I put my hands behind my back so they know I won't touch it. But, I like to see things up close. And so it was a great opportunity. I did museum work for many years because of that experience.
Right. So. Now, so you finish and you're doing your graduate work and you're doing museum, working in the museum. Are you teaching? Is there a part of you that, when did you become Susan Kemner-Reed, the art teacher?
Well, so that's funny, because when I graduated, I thought the last thing I wanted to do was teach. It's like, no, I'm not teaching.
Yeah.
So I left the university art museum there and went over to Laguna Gloria.
Yes.
And I started working over there, and I was asked if I would teach some classes at the art school, and I said, well, I don't know anything about teaching. And they said, no, we think you do. And I said, really? Well, I don't know. Okay, I'll try. And so I did. I taught some classes at the art school, and I realized I liked it a lot. I was also, then I had gotten married, and I was pregnant with my first child. And I really started teaching that with him.
Right.
Because there was something about watching my son grow that, and watching how he learned, that just drew me into the process of learning. How do you do this? And I think that's where I got intrigued about teaching, was how can I teach to this natural, inquisitive being? How do I do that?
Right.
And so if I paid attention and I took my cues from him, I realized that I could do this. And so I would work in the museum for the regular full-time hours, and then I would go and teach at the art school on weekends or evenings.
What age were you teaching at the art school?
All ages. I taught as young as 3 to 5 year olds and up to teenagers, and I also taught adult classes.
Was there? There's a developmental reason why you might approach the different classes differently. Did you find one level more satisfying for you personally to get through teaching, or was it all feel pretty good?
I kind of loved it all because every level was a new challenge. Yeah. What can you get a 3-year-old to do that's not only fun, that's creative, but that also can go home to mom to see, oh, look, this is what my 3-year-old did, What can you teach an adult? Sometimes adults are harder to teach than kids.
I could picture that.
They get very intimidated.
Yeah. What also, when you approach art teaching, you have students of various ability, like on the spectrum. When you have a class full of maybe a student who's just a phenomenal drawer, they just that you can tell they've been drawing, they have a natural inclination for drawing, and then maybe a student who's having a really difficult time with the subject. Did you? What's that experience like? Because a lot of teachers don't know what that's like. They might know, but they'll end up teaching the exact same thing to both of those students.
So my favorite thing was the challenge of the student who didn't think they could do the work. And so my job then was to disprove that. Yes, in fact, they could. And so I always knew the ones that already felt enough confidence to be able to take a class. I knew that they were okay.
Yeah.
But I would still teach them, but it was the person who had the most difficult time that I wanted to be able to pull it out of them, show them that yes, they could do this. So that was always kind of a fun personal challenge.
Yeah. Are there any tricks of the trade for doing that? Is it, or do you kind of, it's an individual student thing?
So a lot of times people are intimidated by this thing, art, like I'm supposed to be good at it already. Right. So, a lot of that kind of talk, well, what's the worst that can happen? Right. A bad drawing, a bad painting. So what? You just, but for first-time people who think they ought to be able to produce something, that's a terrible thing. Yeah. They don't want to see a big painting or a big picture because they don't want to mess. They don't. No, I don't want anybody to see this. And so if I just say that over and over again, so what? What happens if you have a bad drawing today? Yeah. It doesn't end the world. It's just bad drawing. And even if you look at it and you think, well, what could I do to make this work? That's where the real learning comes, not because you could sit down and draw it just exactly the way it was. How can you make this work if you don't like it? Yeah. So I say that probably as much as anything. Yeah. So what can you do to that? And there does seem to be an individualistic thing. You're trying to get them to do something, and you wouldn't ask another person because they didn't draw the same thing, so they're going to come to it differently. But you hear it in the classroom. You hear all this kind of talk in the studio as you're sitting here working, and it takes it makes it easier somehow if you hear somebody else talking. I just can't do this, and you're there sitting there. I can't do it either. There's something about being comrades and in misery. I can't do this either. And I talk a lot about, I couldn't always do this either. Right. So there's I think a lot of sort of gentle nudging. You can. You really can do it. Watch, I'll show you. There does seem to be some parallels with art and math, as we, it has come up in this talk, but that students define themselves as not a math person, that they don't want to try because they're afraid of what it's going to look like. They don't want their work to be shown publicly because they're not confident in it.
I think one day I'd love to see an art and math class here, an interdisciplinary art and math class taught here at St. Andrews.
That'd be pretty neat. Now, Gretchen, who teaches AP chemistry, we've talked about doing chemistry and art because it fits beautifully together.
Oh yeah, I can imagine.
Biology and art fits beautifully together.
Yeah.
I don't know, there's a lot of things that just really fit together. I don't know so much about math because that's just the place. That's sort of my sticking point. I don't really know how to do it.
Yeah.
But it would be fun to see. So what I have embraced as I've continued to teach is technology in art. What can we do? How can we continue to develop our box of tools so that we can move into that area as well? Because there's a huge need for creative people who have technological skills.
And I love having your students come to the M Lab, let me tell you.
Oh gosh, they love coming.
Can I ask that? What is a piece of technology that is a game changer for you when it comes to maybe art? Like having this, if I had this, I would have been able to do this many more paintings, or is there anything that just strikes you as like, this is really special? Students should probably consider how amazing it is that this is available to them. My first thought is Adobe Illustrator of some sort of graphical design software, but that's maybe just too literal.
So this whole building really is about that. I didn't want us to teach just drawing for a class, painting for a class, ceramics for a class. I wanted to have a wide variety of things to sample.
Yeah.
Because for many kids, this is the last place that they'll do art.
Right.
Sadly,
it is true. Yeah,
it's
it was
like,
the last place for me in high school. I didn't get to do studio art classes in college because
you had other things to do.
Yeah, you're taking other classes, and that's money when it gets down to it. Like signing up for those classes, and if it doesn't add to your major somehow or another, you think, well, I guess I'm not taking any art classes.
Well, and I guess what I would like to see is, the kids don't have to go off and be artists.
Right.
They don't have to go off and study art, although there are
a lot of them do. Yeah.
More now than ever. But I guess what I was thinking is that, I just lost my train of thought. Sorry.
No problem.
We'll bring in the Buddha's
hand. Look at that Buddha's hand. Isn't it beautiful? If only there was smell-o-vision. That's the technology.
Draw this, okay? So what was I saying?
You were talking about this building and how you wanted
students
students to continue doing art.
So what we really wanted was a place where you could try all different things. So we have that digital media lab.
Right, yeah.
And for me, that's been just a constant push to do Photoshop in there because I think it's a program that everybody ought to learn.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Whether
they're an artist or not,
yeah.
they should know how to use Photoshop. And I think it's going to be one of those programs that will continue to be that way.
Yeah.
You won't ever escape whatever is the next version.
Right, yeah. I mean, I was just talking with a student about Photoshop for an app, that they were going to try and build up one. So, they need to have knowledge of Photoshop even if they're going to start doing programming, and you might argue.
Well, I think that there are a lot of kids who naturally can go into the digital media lab and just start doing that.
Right.
They're way smarter than me. And
fearless. I think it's like a fearless. They just
part of that.
Click and go for it.
Yeah, I grew up with technology. I can do this.
Yeah.
Whereas I didn't. I had to come to it much later in life.
Yeah.
So it's been really important for me to push that that's also part of this program. So it's not only the traditional things like drawing and painting and printmaking and photography in a dark room.
Yeah.
Again, a dark room. Most places are getting rid of their dark rooms.
Yeah.
Why did we want to build a brand new one? Because there's something that's really fabulous about the tactile film and developing it in the dark room.
Right.
And then we take it and go back across to the digital media lab and we scan our negatives and we play with them in Photoshop.
Right.
There's something about that. I can't exactly tell you what the magic is, but you can work in all different places here. So you can be on the front porch doing ceramics. You can be in here drawing or painting. You can be in there doing Photoshop. So my students, when they come in, they're scattered all over the building.
Right.
Or they go over to see you.
Or the M Lab.
They go over to see you at the M Lab, and so I love that.
I love it too. I mean, there seems to be a sense that art breaks through the walls here in this building, that it's not just one room, because in fact I rarely see students hang out in just one room unless there's some sort of a demonstration or a talk or something that everybody's working on, a shared collaborative project. They seem to find their space, which makes them feel comfortable, and then they do some great art.
Well, I think this is a safe space for them. They come in and often they breathe a sigh of relief and say, oh, okay, I'm in art now.
Yeah.
And I know what that feels like, to be able to come in here and use your brain differently.
Right.
Because so much of the school day is very logical.
Right.
You do this one, then you do that one.
Yeah.
You read this chapter, then you take that test.
Right.
And so I think it's important to be able to come in here and use your brain in a very different way.
Yeah.
And that's what they get to do. And primarily what they do is they have to also make the decisions about what to do.
Yeah.
So they have assignments, but the assignments are so wide open that it means that they have to come up with their own way of interpreting it. I like that
that's
a lot.
great. That's actually really great. I know what it's like for students to come up with ideas. We assume that everybody's good at coming up with an idea, and it's actually not the case. Some people are. Yeah, it's really hard. Some people, they don't know that.
That's a creative process.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, okay, what do I do when she tells me, here's this word, and I don't know what to do? Why do I?
Right.
I'm clueless. But that's okay. That's part of the deal. There's some students who'd rather tell me, they would rather have me tell them what to do.
What do you do with students like that? Whenever they're just saying, please tell me what to do. Just tell me what this word means and how I'm supposed to make it into art.
So I give them about 20 ideas.
Right. But you're not gonna. Do they take those ideas? I mean, do they take one of them?
Sometimes they do.
Yeah.
I say, look, I have more ideas than I'll ever get to in a lifetime.
Right. Yeah.
And so here, I'll give you some of mine.
Yeah.
And usually then they'll come up with their own. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, really, I can do this. I have the freedom to do this.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, really important out in the world, because you can leave from here. You don't ever have to go to art school, but you can be a creative person in whatever you pursue.
Yeah.
Oh, there's lots of ways I could look at this.
Yeah. That's what they're learning is.
That's what I'm teaching.
Is adapting their frame of mind for something different, to create something different.
Uh-huh.
That's pretty amazing.
I think isn't that what we do?
Yeah.
As people, we just go out and we keep adapting to our environment.
Yeah.
We come up with creative ways of doing it.
Yeah.
That's what I do
yeah.
here.
That's what I do. That's what I do. Well, so speaking of you doing that here, it was at Laguna Gloria that you were teaching in the art school, and then somehow or another, that's how the St. Andrews connection came to be. Is that correct?
Well, it is. I left there, though, to go and start the Austin Children's Museum.
Okay.
So I was their first curator and director of exhibits, and I did that for 6 years. And then I took some time off, and I went back to Laguna Gloria to work exclusively in the art school.
Okay.
And when I did that, I was hiring teachers and doing classes and scheduling and all of that. But I said, I'll do this administrative work if I can also teach.
Right.
And so I did. I would teach at least a couple of classes each semester. St. Andrews came to me and said, could you develop a program for our kids, because we don't have an art room.
Right.
They were in the portables for the high school. And so they would come out to Laguna Gloria because it wasn't very far.
Yeah.
And we would provide different artists from our program to be able to work with them. So they'd get like an artist for 6 weeks in painting, and an artist for 6 weeks in drawing. So the very first class, though, was me teaching them everybody in the school how to draw.
Wow.
Which was pretty much fun. So
yeah.
I liked that. And Hillary Carlson was the head of the upper school at that time. It was brand new. And so I did that for 2 years, setting everything up for St. Andrews, sending teachers over here.
Right.
Hillary one time said, well, when you're ready, let me know. And so I did.
Yeah.
I let her know. I said, okay, I'm ready. Well, okay, it's 17 years later, and
right.
I didn't intend to stay that long.
What was your intention, did you think?
Well, I never really, 6 years was about as long as I could stay anywhere, because I had to keep reinventing myself in a job. So I did for about 2 years. I'd be the registrar, I don't know, whatever it was, the associate director. I would do this, I would do the education parts. And so I always had to keep having new things because I would get bored.
So what do you think is kept you here for 17 years? Is it?
Well, because it's not boring.
Yeah.
You know, I constantly change the curriculum. It's never the same.
Right.
The students are never the same.
Yeah.
They're happy. They want to be here. They like coming to class.
Yeah.
The program continues to grow, and I like that.
Well, you say you constantly change the curriculum. Now that could be, to somebody else, one of the most fearful things to do is to change their curriculum, you know, on an ongoing basis. But is it more work to change your curriculum?
Well, sure, it'd be easier.
Yeah,
I mean,
it'd be easier to just keep it, but then...
Well, I remember when my kids were in art in public school. So 4th grade, they did Georgia O'Keeffe, you know, and everybody did a flower.
Yeah.
5th grade, they did the Aboriginal dot piece. And, you know, and that's just the way it was. And
right.
I just didn't want it to be that way.
Yeah.
I wanted it to be more open and more creative and new ideas. So I never use the same word twice.
Right.
But there's always a word.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, there's that
theme, but yeah.
But it's never the same word. And I always ask them to go to a museum or gallery.
Right.
But there's always different shows.
Yeah.
So it's always a different experience. And, you know, I want them to keep knowing the new artists that are creating art. So contemporary art is very important for me to keep introducing them. And I want them to work with other artists, not just me. So we bring in artist mentors.
Yeah. Which is amazing. That students,
it is amazing.
Yeah, it's really
the coolest
amazing.
Thing.
Yeah.
So what's not to love about that?
I know. I mean,
I get to design it.
Yeah.
You know, I get to change it. I get to do it.
Yeah.
You get these cool people around me.
Well, I'd have to say that you know, there's other areas of the school that could learn some things about, you know, teaching and curriculum and what their students are learning from the art department at school. We so often forget that students run in the door and sit down and are excited about being here, and it's their own interest that's driving them inside the door and into this room. And really, there's not a overemphasis on grades that in art classes. And yet, these kids do amazing work. So, you know, just to contrast that with other areas of the schools, sometimes, you know, if you took the grade away in another subject, they would worry that the students aren't going to do any work.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, so I don't give tests unless they're really funny tests, and
right?
Creative ones where you have to come up with some really strange something or other.
Yeah.
But you know, I there's a certain number of things I ask them to do, but otherwise, there's a lot of time to try things, to try them again, you know, to make a mistake, then to do it again and say, oh man, I really love that, or take something they don't like and turn it into something new. And I don't know that there's that flexibility when you have a lot of information to get across.
Yeah. Well.
But I like it.
Yeah.
You know, they get lots done, so.
It's something I think for another podcast, but I'd love to talk with you about sort of the lessons that we could impart upon other areas of the school just by looking at the art classroom. But for another time.
Well, for a long time, my motto was that I was going to take over the world with art. But I sort of dropped that. I thought that was a little grandiose. So
yeah.
Now, honestly, I just really want kids to be able to walk out of here and love art so much that they're willing to go look at art, walk into a contemporary museum, not be afraid.
Right.
To look at creative people, to go and do creative things. We need creative people in this world.
We really do.
I mean, otherwise, it's going to be the same old, same old.
Yeah.
I'd like to see new things happen.
Me too.
So.
All right, well, we're about to have a bell ring, so I'm going to go through the last of these questions that I've asked every teacher. So you've gotten a chance to look at these. We'll try and go rapid fire.
Okay.
So Susan Kemner-Reed, what do you do for fun?
I draw. I take photographs. I work in my garden. I love to play with my grandchildren.
Yeah.
I don't get to see them as much as I'd like to, but
that's
fun stuff.
Yeah. So what bores you?
What bores me? I don't get bored very often.
That's good.
I'm rarely bored.
That's good. What aspect of school stifled you as a student? You might be saved by the bell now.
I loved learning. There was just some things that were hard for me to learn.
Right. So the aspects of school that uplifted you?
Learning. I mean, just I loved learning.
Yeah. What's your favorite part of being a teacher?
Learning along with my students.
Nice.
Teaching them and having them teach me.
That's amazing.
It's a great thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's the best because they're going to teach you something that you hadn't thought
Oh, they
about.
always do.
Yeah.
They always do.
So what's your least favorite part of being a teacher?
Oh, grading.
Great. Yeah.
I sit down with each student every trimester for at least 20 or 30 minutes to do the grading. I love the grading.
Mm-hmm.
I just hate putting a number to
Right,
it.
yeah. It's tough. Yeah. What subject would you like to teach at a school other than your own?
The subject that I already teach.
Yeah. Other than art.
Do I have to want to?
No. So how about what subject would you not like to teach?
Oh, that was easy. I would not like to coach, and I would not like to teach math.
There you go. What mistake did you learn the most from in your life, if you can think of one?
Oh gosh, I've made so many mistakes. Probably the best thing that I can think of is that whenever I make what I think is a mistake, is if I learn from it, I'm okay.
Right.
So if I can take something that's a mistake and turn it into something that's not a mistake, whether it's just learning how to live or whether it's making art,
Yeah.
that's the best thing I can do.
All right. And finally, Susan, how do you believe people learn?
I think that we are just sponges and that we just want to learn and learn and learn.
Yeah.
What bothers me is when people get shut down from learning.
Right.
That's a tragedy.
It's
I don't know why students don't come in high school the same enthusiasm as
Right.
flies on the wall.
yeah.
I should maybe just as much.
Should. Well, speaking of students running through the door, your students are coming in now, so we're going to end this. But thank you so much for joining me, and we'll talk more.